Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the noise and deliver high-impact knowledge directly to you.
Uh-huh.
If your study routine currently involves, highlighting every third sentence in a textbook or pulling all-nighters fueled by questionable coffee, this deep dive is going to change everything.
That's the mission today. Yeah. We are moving decisively beyond the flawed mindset of studying harder.
Right. Which usually just means more pain, not more gain.
Exactly. It translates to agonizing hours with incredibly inefficient methods. Our goal is to provide a synthesis of the latest cognitive science, academic development guides, and proven student strategies
Okay.
to build a clear, actionable blueprint for studying smarter. We're focused on maximizing long-term retention and efficiency.
Because here is the essential paradox that traps almost everyone.
Yeah.
The most common study habits, simply reading and rereading texts, rewriting notes verbatim,
Oh, yeah.
or highlighting until the page glows yellow, are shockingly ineffective.
They really are.
They're the study equivalent of running on a treadmill that isn't plugged in.
That's a great analogy. It creates what researchers term the illusion of competence.
Illusion of competence, right?
You feel familiar with the material because the correct answer, the correct concept, is right there in front of you.
You recognize it.
You mistake recognition for recall.
Yeah.
But that false sense of familiarity evaporates instantly when the test arrives, and you are forced to retrieve that knowledge without cues.
And then panic sets in?
Pretty much. Effective, high-impact studying must involve active, challenging engagement.
Okay, let's unpack this and start with the mechanics. Because, to truly manipulate our study process for maximum gain, we first have to understand the fundamental hardware, how our brain actually forms and holds on to memories.
Right. We start with the journey from short-term to long-term memory. Think of your brain's initial memory system like a temporary data transfer station.
Okay, like RAM in a computer.
Sort of, yeah. When you encounter a new concept, let's use the anatomy of the respiratory system as our example, that new memory is temporarily encoded by specific groups of neurons primarily located in the hippocampus.
The hippocampus.
Got it.
That's your short-term buffer.
So the hippocampus is the immediate holding area. If I learn about the bronchial tubes in class, those neurons are excited in the hippocampus.
Right. They fire up.
What happens when I study that same material later that day or the next week?
You are activating those exact same neural pathways.
Yeah.
Every time you reactivate them, the repeated excitation strengthens the connections or synapses between those cells.
Right.
This stabilization process is called consolidation. It's like physically reinforcing the circuit so the memory becomes more robust.
But the hippocampus, like any buffer, has limited capacity, right? It can't hold everything forever.
Exactly. It has limited capacity, so where does that knowledge go to stick around permanently?
Yeah.
It gradually moves into permanent long-term storage within the neocortex,
From the neocortex. Okay.
which we can analogize to the brain's massive permanent hard drive. What's absolutely crucial for you, for our listeners to understand, is that this transfer and consolidation, it doesn't happen during the study session when you are focused. Not while I'm reading.
No, it happens primarily between study sessions and most significantly during sleep.
Wait, hang on. If the heavy lifting of consolidation happens when I'm not studying, when I'm actually asleep, that changes everything about how I schedule my time. Cramming suddenly seems like a really bad idea.
Precisely. During deep, non-REM, slow-wave sleep, the hippocampus basically replays the day's new information to the neocortex.
Replays it like a highlight reel.
Kind of, yeah. It's like a nightly organizational audit. The brain is actively pruning away weak or unnecessary synaptic connections and strengthening the important ones.
Ah, okay.
This is how new knowledge is actively integrated with the adjacent concepts you already know, connecting, say, the bronchial tubes to gas exchange mechanics, for instance. It builds the network.
So if you pull an all-nighter cramming, you are literally short-circuiting the very mechanism the brain uses to finalize and secure the information you just took in.
That's exactly why cramming is doomed for long-term failure. You block the crucial transfer process.
You're skipping the save function.
You are. The efficiency is terrible. The brain needs rest to effectively sort and preserve the vast volume of information it receives daily, strengthening the overall network and making the memories easier to find later.
Okay, so the info makes it to the neocortex, the long-term storage. Is it just filed away then? Static? Like a book on a shelf?
No, and this is the most fascinating part, I think, which leads directly to our first set of strategies. Long-term memory is dynamic. It's not static at all.
Okay.
Every time you consciously retrieve a piece of information, recalling the function of the alveoli, for example, You activate that memory in the neocortex, but you temporarily destabilize it.
Temporarily destabilize it. That sounds risky. Like I might break the memory.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it's not risky. It's adaptive. Once retrieved, the memory needs to be resaved or reconsolidated.
Ah, yeah.
And in this brief window, you can update it, strengthen it, or merge it with even newer information.
Huh.
This dynamic process of retrieval and reconsolidation is the foundational key to effective study.
So we want to destabilize it by pulling it up.
We must trigger retrieval because that is the moment the memory circuit actually strengthens and updates. That effort is the learning.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting then, because the most effective study habits are those that force that memory retrieval we just discussed.
Yeah.
You force the brain to work hard to actually find the answer, not just look at it.
Exactly. We're now in section 2, active recall and retrieval practice. This is the bedrock. We have to draw a stark contrast between passive study things like rereading, highlighting, underlining, and active study.
The stuff most people do.
The stuff most people do, yeah. Passive methods feel comfortable, they feel productive, but they create that illusion of competence we mentioned.
Right, because the answer's right there.
Precisely. The material is present. Your brain doesn't have to struggle to produce the answer, it just has to recognize it.
I used to fall into that trap all the time. I'd read a chapter, highlight everything, maybe rewrite my notes neatly, and tell myself, okay, I got this. Then I'd get to the quiz and realize I couldn't write down a single definition without the book open. Total blank.
That's the classic failure mode. The key to high-impact learning, the thing that actually builds lasting memory, is the act of self-testing, forcing yourself to retrieve the knowledge from scratch.
Okay.
This is a far more effortful task, often called a desirable difficulty.
Desirable difficulty. I like
It
that.
feels harder in the moment, absolutely, but that effort is exactly what updates and strengthens the memory trace, making it easier to recall when it genuinely counts, like on an exam or in a real-world application.
So if retrieval practice is like weightlifting for the brain, as you said earlier,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
what does the actual rep look like? What are the exercises?
The rep is any activity where you close the book, put away the notes, and try to generate the information yourself.
Okay.
Using flashcards is a classic. Creating practice quizzes for yourself, writing a summary from memory, or even explaining a concept out loud to an empty chair, or your cat, or a rubber duck.
The rubber duck method.
Hey, whatever works. The harder you fight to retrieve the information, the more robust the memory becomes when you finally get it.
And many students, especially when starting retrieval practice, get frustrated if they can't immediately pull up the answer. They think, oh, I'm failing at this. But we shouldn't fear getting the answer wrong during this process, should we?
Absolutely not. Actually, the opposite is true. Don't fear failure. Mistakes actually help improve the learning process long term.
How so?
When you struggle to find the answer, your brain engages relevant fragments of knowledge. It's sort of priming the neural network. Then when you receive the correct answer, the feedback, maybe from checking your notes or the flashcard back, your brain is primed to integrate that new, correct information much more effectively.
It sees the gap.
It identifies the gap and immediately fills it, strengthening the connection. Struggling, making errors, and then getting corrective feedback. That is learning happening.
The analogy from the sources, comparing retrieval practice to weightlifting, really drives this home. You don't get stronger by just staring at the weights on the rack.
No.
You get stronger by attempting the lift, even if you struggle, even if you fail the rep sometimes.
It is the perfect metaphor for synaptic strengthening. You got to work those circuits. Now, let's look at 2 specific, powerful techniques that really embody this active learning principle.
Okay, let's dig in. The first is arguably the most famous self-teaching method, the Feynman technique. This seems especially helpful for abstract or technical subjects, right?
It is highly effective, particularly for those, because it directly tests your depth of understanding, not just surface recall. The principle has 4 basic steps.
Okay, step 1.
First, identify the concept you want to learn. Be specific. Second, explain it aloud in your own simplified, non-jargon-filled language, as if you were teaching a complete beginner and explain like I'm 5 approach, basically.
Okay, so no hiding behind fancy terms.
Yeah, exactly. You have to break it down. And I assume that's where the gaps in your own understanding become painfully obvious.
They leap out at you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Step 3 is identify those gaps. Whenever you get stuck or find yourself using vague language or reaching for the textbook explanation, you know exactly where your understanding breaks down. That's your specific focus area for review.
Okay, pinpoint the weak spots.
Then, step 4, go back to the source material, but only to fill those specific gaps. Then try simplifying your explanation again.
Right.
You repeat the process until your explanation is simple, clear, accurate, and comprehensive, using your own words.
For technical subjects like calculus or organic chemistry, what does that sound like? Is it just talking?
Good question. For a technical class, it's not just lecturing into the air. It's working a problem, a differential equation maybe, or balancing a chemical reaction, and explaining not just the steps, but the why behind each step.
Ah, the reasoning.
Yeah, why that specific formula, why this theorem applies here. You are deriving examples and making explicit connections between the concepts. If you can only solve the problem by mechanically following the template in the book, you haven't truly mastered the why. The Feynman method forces you to articulate that why.
Okay, that makes sense. Moving beyond teaching yourself, let's look at structured reading approaches that stop us from just passively absorbing text. You mentioned the SQ3R and PQ4R methods.
Right, these are formal strategies designed to force active engagement, especially with dense academic texts that can easily lull you into just scanning. SQ3R stands for survey, question, read, recite, and review.
Okay, let's break down the psychological leverage of each step. Start with survey and question. What's happening there?
Surveying involves quickly skimming the chapter. Look at the headings, subheadings, any images or diagrams, maybe the introduction and conclusion. This helps your brain create a mental map or outline of what you're about to learn before you dive in.
Like looking at a map before starting a journey.
Exactly. Then, based on those headings, you question. You turn the headings into explicit questions. So if a heading is the causes of the French Revolution, your question becomes, okay, what were the primary causes of the French Revolution?
So instead of being a passive recipient of information, my brain is already primed, already in search mode for answers.
Precisely. Then you read, but you're not just reading aimlessly. You're actively looking specifically for the answers to the questions you just formulated.
Makes the reading much more targeted and efficient, I imagine.
It does. Next, recite. This is crucial, and it's pure retrieval practice. Immediately after reading a section, you stop, look away from the book, and summarize the key points and the answers to your questions in your own words.
Out loud or written?
Either. Recite them aloud, write them down from memory, whatever works. The key is generating it yourself, not copying it.
Okay. And finally, review.
Review means coming back later, maybe the next day, or using spaced repetition and quizzing yourself on the overall material using the questions you generated or summary notes.
And the PQ4R method, just a variation.
Pretty much. It builds on SQ3R by adding an extra R for reflection. So it's preview, question, read, reflect, recite, and review.
Reflect. What does that add?
The reflect step explicitly asks you to pause during the reading process, maybe after a major section, and check. Did I answer all my initial questions for this part? Does this new material connect logically to what I already knew or what came before?
Ah, so it reinforces metacognition, thinking about your own thinking and understanding as you go.
Exactly. Both methods force you out of passive reading mode.
These sound like they require a massive amount of mental energy, which is good, but maybe tiring. Which leads me to the low-fidelity trick you found in the sources. The scribble method. Sounds a bit odd.
This is a fun one to try, maybe more anecdotal, but interesting. We know that physically writing things down generally creates stronger memory traces than typing.
Right, the motor connection helps.
So the scribble method tries to kind of trick your brain into thinking you're doing that. While reading, you constantly scribble patterns or random words, anything really, with your non-dominant hand.
My non-dominant hand. Why that?
It's more effortful, requires more concentration just for the scribbling itself. It's theorized that this low-level motor activity, mimicking the physical effort of note-taking, somehow signals to the brain that the input you're reading is important and aids memorization, especially if the text is really dry or boring.
Worth a shot, I guess. Can't hurt.
Maybe. So we've covered the what and the how of studying using active retrieval. Now we need to tackle the when and where, mastering the clock and the environment, which is frankly where the majority of students fall down, I think.
Agreed. This is where good intentions often meet reality.
This brings us to Section 3, and we have to start with the definitive case against cramming. Massed study, the glorious time-honored tradition of pulling all-nighters.
Ah, yes, the student rite of passage.
It's fundamentally counterproductive for long-term retention. It might earn you a passable grade on a test tomorrow.
Maybe, if you're lucky.
But you'll forget almost everything 2 weeks later. It's incredibly inefficient learning.
Because, as we established back in Section 1, cramming prevents the critical memory consolidation that happens between sessions and, crucially, while we sleep.
Right. You're trying to shove more data into the hippocampus's inbox when it desperately needs downtime to file everything properly in the neocortex.
Exactly. And we have powerful high-stakes evidence of this failure mode. I want to spend a moment on that 2006 study involving surgical residents. These are people whose mastery is literally life and death. You can't afford the illusion of competence there.
Okay, tell us what they found. This sounds important.
The study focused on a very specific technical skill, microsurgery, specifically how to apply stitches to tiny arteries. They split the residents into two groups.
Group 1.
The first group performed massed study. They crammed all the theory and practice into one grueling, intense day, hours and hours straight.
Okay, the crammers. Group 2.
The second group performed space practice. They distributed the exact same total amount of practice time, but spread it out over 4 separate sessions across 4 weeks.
Wow, okay. That feels like a huge difference in approach. One intense day versus a month of shorter sessions. Same total time, though.
Same total time, different schedule. The results were dramatic when tested immediately after their respective training periods. Both groups performed roughly the same. The crammers did okay right away.
Ah, so cramming seemed to work initially.
It gave that illusion again. But here's the crucial measurement. When researchers brought them back 1 month later to assess retention and application of the stitching skill,
A month later. Okay.
the spaced practice group performed significantly better. Their recall was stronger, their application of the skill was cleaner, their technique had stabilized. The cramming group, much of the skill had degraded. They lost the information quickly.
That is the power of spaced practice, or distributed practice, made undeniable. Wow. The total time spent was the same, maybe even less stressful for the spaced group.
Probably less stressful, yeah.
But the efficiency for long-term retention and actual skill was vastly superior.
It is arguably the single most impactful learning strategy available, and the research supporting it is incredibly robust across many domains. Spacing involves spreading out your study sessions over multiple short periods across days and weeks.
You're giving your brain those necessary intervals.
The restorative intervals, yeah.
Yeah.
For organization, for consolidation, for integration into the neocortex. By revisiting the material right before you completely forget it, you force that retrieval effort repeatedly, strengthening the trace each time.
So practically speaking, how do we apply this? You can't just say, oh, I'll review this randomly next week. We need some structure, right?
Absolutely. We need structured intervals that align with the natural decay of memory, what's often called the forgetting curve. A simple, actionable technique is the 123 method.
The 123 method. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds easy to remember.
It is. It's highly effective. Let's break down the timing.
Okay, lay it out.
You review the material at 3 critical points after first learning it. 1, immediately after the initial lecture or learning session. That's the 1. Maybe just a quick 5-10 minute review.
Okay, lock it in initially.
2, 24 hours later, the 2. This is typically when the initial memory trace starts to fade significantly, so you force the first major retrieval effort here.
Strike while the iron is cooling, but before it's cold.
Exactly. 3, 1 week later, the 3. This review helps solidify the information into more durable long-term memory.
That schedule specifically leverages the moments when the brain is just starting to forget the material, forcing that desirable difficulty we talked about.
Precisely.
When it's most beneficial, right before the memory degrades too much. You're catching it just in time.
You are efficiently targeting the moments of greatest memory vulnerability to maximize reinforcement. The brain essentially says, hey, I almost lost this, but you forced me to find it again, so it must be important, and it strengthens the connection accordingly.
Okay, space practice is huge. What's the second key timing principle?
Yeah.
You mentioned something that often seems counterintuitive to students. Interleaving, mixing things up.
Yes, interleaving. This means alternating or mixing concepts from different topics within a single study session.
Instead of block practice.
Right. Instead of studying, say, 20 flashcards on topic A, then 20 on topic B, you shuffle the whole deck together. If you are solving math problems, instead of doing 20 examples of the same type of problem, all quadratic formula problems.
Yeah, drilling one type.
You cycle through quadratic formula problems, then maybe factoring problems, then graphing problems, all mixed together randomly.
But wait, wouldn't that just make things harder and more confusing? If I keep having to switch gears mentally, I might get frustrated and feel like I'm failing at everything. Isn't focused practice on one topic more efficient for mastery?
That difficulty, that switching, is precisely the benefit. Focused practice, what researchers call blocking, makes you feel good in the short term because you just apply the same rule or procedure over and over again. You get fast at it.
Yeah, you feel like you're getting momentum.
But interleaving forces the brain to do something much more complex and valuable. It has to identify which strategy or rule applies to this specific problem, rather than simply executing a repetitive action it just learned.
Ah, so it forces discrimination, not just execution.
Yes. You have to figure out what kind of problem it is first, then how to solve it. Cycling through different subjects or problem types forces the brain to forget temporarily and then actively retrieve not just the information, but the correct strategy when the topic comes back up.
Okay, I see.
This deepens the memory for both the concept and its application, and it allows you to discover connections or, more importantly, clearly understand the differences between topics, which aids in long-term transferable comprehension. You learn when not to use a certain method, too.
That makes sense. So we need short, spaced intervals, thanks to spaced practice. And within those intervals, we should mix things up using interleaving. But you also mentioned intensity. Long, drawn-out study marathons are inherently inefficient, even if spaced.
They absolutely are. Our capacity for focused concentration is surprisingly limited. After a certain point, maybe 50 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, depending on the person and the task, concentration wanes significantly.
Our brain gets tired.
Yeah, cognitive load management decreases, you start making silly mistakes, your reading speed slows down. Intensive, short study sessions that are fully dedicated to active retrieval are far more effective than long, passive sessions that inevitably include checking social media, daydreaming, or just staring blankly at the page.
Quality over quantity again. Which brings us to the most famous time management routine for focus, the Pomodoro technique.
Ah, yes, the Pomodoro technique, developed by Francesco Cirillo back in the 80s using a tomato-shaped kitchen timer. It's the gold standard for optimizing intensity and fighting mental fatigue.
Simple but effective.
It maximizes learning through short, aggressively targeted segments of work. The core routine is simple. 25 minutes of intense, uninterrupted focus on a single specific task.
Just one thing.
Just one thing, followed by a short break of 5 to 10 minutes. You repeat this cycle. After maybe 4 Pomodoro cycles, so about 2 hours of work, you take a longer, more substantial break, maybe 20, 30 minutes.
And the rule I always stress to people when they try this is those short breaks are non-negotiable, and they absolutely must be restorative breaks, not just switching distractions.
That is the secret sauce. It's so important. The break is not for checking email, scrolling Instagram, or reading news headlines.
Why not? Seems like a break.
Because that defeats the purpose. Screens, especially engaging ones, immediately drag your brain back into the kind of cognitive load you were trying to escape. It doesn't allow for that mental reset. The break should involve light physical activity, ideally away from your desk.
Like what?
Stand up, stretch, get a glass of water, maybe walk around the room or step outside for a breath of fresh air, something low cognitive. This sends oxygen-rich blood to your brain, allows the newly learned information to start settling, and resets your focus for the next 25-minute burst.
Okay, so we have the powerful retrieval tools like Feynman and flashcards. We have the timing principles like spacing and interleaving, maybe managed with Pomodoro. But active study and distributed practice, they rely entirely on preparation, don't they? You can't space your study sessions if you don't know when the exams are or even what you need to study.
Exactly. Which brings us neatly to Section 4, structuring success, organization, and environment. Organization is the indispensable framework. It's what transforms good intentions about spacing and active recall into successful execution.
So step 1 is planning.
Yes, students must use planners, calendars, task lists, whatever system works for them, to schedule specific, realistic, and time-bound goals for each study session. We strongly advocate for using the SMART method for setting these study goals.
SMART goals. Remind us what that stands for.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Okay, give me some strong contrasting examples. Vague, useless study goals versus smart, productive ones.
Okay, a vague, useless goal is spend Saturday studying for my history midterm.
Yeah, that's basically permission to procrastinate all day.
Right. It's undefined. It allows for endless procrastination and probably just passive reading when you finally get around to it. A SMART goal for the same situation might be, by 2:00 p.m. on Saturday, I will be able to write out bullet points from memory listing the 4 main arguments of the Federalist Papers, measurable specific, and create a 1-page mind map connecting them to the Bill of Rights, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
Okay, much clearer. Actionable. Another example.
A poor goal. Look over economics notes tonight, a SMART goal. Work through 5 supply and demand curve problems from Chapter 3, explaining each step aloud between 7:00 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. tonight. specific, measurable, time-bound.
The big difference is that the SMART goal forces an active, finite task you can actually check off your list, which feels good.
It provides positive reinforcement, builds momentum, and ensures you're actually doing the active retrieval we talked about. This requires routine planning, though.
Weekly and daily.
Both are ideal. Weekly planning, maybe done on Sunday night, helps you look at the entire week ahead, assignments, exams, commitments, and allocate specific time blocks for studying different subjects using spaced practice principles.
Okay, map out the week.
Then daily planning, maybe done the night before or first thing in the morning, ensures you wake up with a concrete, actionable plan for that day, preventing that classic morning paralysis of, what should I work on first?
Yeah, the overwhelm.
We really encourage daily work on every class, even if it's just in short bursts. 30 minutes per class, 6 days a week. That's 3 hours of highly effective, spaced, interleaved study per class over the week, which is exponentially superior to trying to cram those 3 hours in one exhausting session right before the test.
Consistency over intensity, in a way. Distributed intensity.
Well put. And when the pressure lets up, what should you do with that extra time, those lighter weeks?
Resist the urge to just binge watch something.
Exactly. Never waste a lull. Lighter weeks are critical opportunities. Instead of just relaxing completely, which is also important, sometimes use those extra hours proactively. Get ahead on readings for the next week. Start outlining a longer paper. Review older material using spaced repetition before it fades too much. Or reorganize your notes using mind maps.
Be prepared for the storm.
This proactive approach ensures that when the inevitable storm of overlapping deadlines and midterms hits, you are already well prepared, less stressed, and you have buffer time to deal with unexpected challenges like getting sick or having a computer issue.
Okay, planning is key.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the physical space. The default advice is always find a perfectly quiet spot, like a library, Carol. But you suggested earlier that silence isn't always golden.
Well, a quiet, well-lit, low-traffic area with a clean desk is generally the baseline requirement for concentration for most people. Clutter can be distracting. But the ideal spot varies widely depending on the person and the task. For some really intense cognitive tasks requiring deep focus, like complex problem-solving or writing, complete silence might be necessary.
Okay.
But for other types of studying, especially active retrieval methods like reciting material aloud or working through flashcards, a little bit of background buzz can actually be helpful for some people.
How so?
It provides a subtle level of ambient noise that doesn't completely derail focus, but can make the silence less oppressive. Think a well-populated but not rowdy library floor or a low-key coffee shop. Some people focus better with that gentle hum. And active studying itself, like reciting, is rarely silent anyway.
That's true. And you also mentioned something interesting about changing the environment periodically. That it can actually boost recall.
Yeah, there's some research suggesting that occasionally changing your study environment, maybe switching from the library on Monday to a campus lounge on Tuesday, then a new coffee shop on Wednesday, can slightly increase recall performance later.
Why would that be?
The theory is that the different contexts, the sights, the sounds act as subtle, distinct retrieval cues when you try to recall the information later. The memories become less tied to one single location. It might also just add a bit of cognitive freshness that aids learning, preventing boredom.
Interesting. Worth experimenting with. Okay. Regardless of the environment, silent library or buzzing coffee shop, what's the #1 undisputed killer of focused study time? We all know it.
Unquestionably, it is the modern plague of electronics and the seductive, damaging myth multitasking.
The phone.
The phone, the laptop notifications, the constant connectivity. Research is absolutely crystal clear on this, attempting to do 2 cognitive tasks at once, like reading a dense academic paper while occasionally responding to text messages.
Which everyone does.
Doesn't just increase the total time needed to finish the reading, it drastically reduces the quality of the learning and comprehension because you're constantly paying a cognitive cost for switching tasks back and forth. Your brain has to reorient every time.
And you said the effect is even more insidious than just actively checking the phone. The mere presence of it matters.
Yes. Studies have shown that even the mere presence of your smartphone sitting face up on the desk within your line of sight measurably decreases your available cognitive capacity.
Even if you don't touch it.
Even if you don't touch it. Your brain is constantly allocating a small subconscious portion of its resources to resisting the impulse to check it or anticipating the next notification buzz. That background cognitive drain diminishes your ability to fully focus on the actual study material in front of you.
Wow. That's sobering. So the actionable steps here are pretty radical, but non-negotiable.
They have to be if you're serious about focus. Turn off your phone, not just silent, OFF, and physically move it out of sight. Put it in a drawer, leave it in another room, give it to a friend.
Create distance.
Yes. If you need your computer for studying, use website and application blockers like Forest, AppBlock, or Cold Turkey. Set timers to block distracting websites and all social media during your focused Pomodoro periods. You must create a sacred, distraction-free zone and defend it aggressively against interruptions, both digital and human, if possible.
Okay, beyond calendars and removing distractions, what organizational tools help structure the information itself more effectively? Let's start with mind mapping.
Mind mapping is an incredibly powerful, nonlinear note-taking and brainstorming tool, especially beneficial for visual learners or when you're trying to grasp a complex system with many interconnected parts.
How does it work visually?
It involves visually organizing information in a diagram. You start with the central concept or topic, say the human nervous system, written in the center of the page. Then you draw branches radiating outwards for main ideas like central nervous system, peripheral nervous system. From those main branches, you draw smaller sub-branches for specific details, functions, components like brain, spinal cord, somatic, autonomic.
So it looks kind of like a tree or a spider web.
Exactly. How does that benefit retention compared to traditional linear list-based notes?
The structure itself mimics how the brain naturally stores and retrieves information, which is hierarchically and associatively through connections, not usually in straight lines.
It matches the brain's architecture.
Yeah. Mind mapping significantly improves comprehension because it forces you to actively synthesize the material, decide on the hierarchy, and immediately see the big picture relationships between ideas. Rather than just processing an endless, disconnected list of facts, it helps you build that mental model.
Okay, I can see how that visual structure would be powerful. And we also see people using color-coded notes for organizing and prioritizing information. Is there science behind that, or does it just look pretty?
There's some science, though it's maybe more subtle. Using a whole rainbow of colors everywhere is probably just distracting and counterproductive.
Right, visual clutter.
But using warm colors, specifically red and yellow, seem to be mentioned most often in research strategically for key concepts, definitions, action items, or priority levels, can improve memory performance slightly.
Why warm colors?
Researchers suggest these colors naturally capture attention more effectively than cooler colors, and they might even increase a subtle level of physiological arousal or excitement toward the material, making the key points literally stand out and seem more important to your brain. Just don't overdo it.
Okay, we've covered the specific techniques like active recall, the scheduling principles like spacing and Pomodoro, and the organizational structures like planning and mind maps. But all these high-impact methods rest on a foundation that many students, honestly, neglect until it's too late: their own health and the support systems around them. We are now in Section 5, Holistic Strategies and Academic Support.
Right, you can have the best techniques in the world, but if you're exhausted or overwhelmed, they won't work.
Exactly. The absolute foundation of focus, concentration, and learning is physical and mental well-being. And as we hinted at back in Section 1 when talking about consolidation, the single most crucial element here is sleep.
Not very glamorous, but essential.
Utterly essential. Lack of quality sleep takes a severe toll on everything: your mood, your ability to concentrate, your motivation, and particularly, as we discussed, your brain's ability to strengthen and consolidate new memories. Sleep deprivation basically cripples the learning process.
So if sleep is paramount for consolidation, what does that mean for our bedtime routine? Should we avoid studying right before bed?
Actually, the opposite might be true for review. Studying before bed can be incredibly effective for certain types of learning, especially memorization.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Doing a final review of flashcards, mentally reciting key points, or walking through the most challenging concepts right before you settle down to sleep can help improve recall the next day. Because when you are asleep, especially during those deep, slow wave phases, your brain is actively organizing and consolidating the material you just reviewed. You're essentially priming the brain with the information it needs to work on overnight, strengthening those synaptic connections while you rest.
So, a little pre-sleep review is good, but pulling the all-nighter is still terrible.
Absolutely. Consistent, sufficient sleep is non-negotiable. Beyond rest, we need fuel and movement to maintain that intensity during those focused Pomodoro sessions.
Right, can't run on empty.
A consistent, healthy routine, a reasonably balanced diet, and regular physical activity improves overall energy levels and focus, which directly translates to better study capacity and endurance. Exercise, even just a brisk 20-minute walk outside during a longer break.
Gets the blood flowing.
Exactly. It fights mental fatigue, releases endorphins, which boost mood and reduce stress, and literally kickstarts brain function by increasing blood flow and oxygen delivery. This helps improve memory and overall cognitive performance. Don't just sit there for hours.
What about the fuel side? We all love coffee, I know I do, but sustained energy is key, right? Not just a caffeine jolt followed by a crash.
Right. Smart snacking is critical for sustained concentration. Avoid the quick sugar fixes like candy bars, sugary sodas, or even huge sugary energy drinks. They give you a rapid spike in energy, followed by an equally rapid crash that leaves you feeling worse than before. Instead, focus on sustainable energy sources for your study breaks.
Like what?
Things like nuts, almonds, walnuts, seeds, pumpkin, sunflower, fruits like apples or bananas, maybe some edamame, Greek yogurt, or a protein bar with low sugar. These provide slower release fuel to keep your brain focused and your energy levels stable throughout those intense 25-minute bursts. Hydration is key too. Drink water.
Good reminders.
Okay.
Let's circle back to active retrieval for a moment with a highly structured, almost algorithmic method for memorization that perfectly leverages spacing. The Leitner system. This sounds intense.
It is one of the most elegant and ruthlessly efficient systems ever devised for learning large volumes of factual information using flashcards. It's based entirely on assessing your own mastery and applying systematic spaced repetition automatically.
Okay, walk us through the mechanics of the Leitner system because its description in the sources can sound a bit overly complicated with boxes and schedules. Make it simple.
It's physically simple to set up, but cognitively genius in its operation. You use typically 5 physical containers. These could be actual small boxes, envelopes, or even just designated piles on your desk. Or you can use digital flashcard apps that automate this. You label them box 1 through box 5.
Okay, 5 boxes. Where do cards start?
Every new flashcard you create starts in box 1. The boxes represent different review intervals, getting longer as the box number increases.
Okay, how does a card move between the boxes? That's the core of it, right?
That's the core. It works like this. Box 1, highest frequency. You review the cards in box 1 every day, or maybe every study session. If you get a card correct, it graduates, it moves up to box 2. If you get it incorrect, it stays in box 1, or maybe even goes back to the very beginning of box 1.
Okay, correct moves up, incorrect stays put.
Box 2, lower frequency. Maybe you review box 2 every other day, or every 2-3 days. Same rule. If you answer correctly, the card moves up to box 3. If you answer incorrectly, it gets demoted. It moves all the way back down to box 1.
Ouch. Back to the start.
Yes, that's the key. It forces you to relearn things you've forgotten. Box 3, even lower frequency. Maybe review these every 4 or 5 days or once a week. Correct moves to box 4, incorrect goes back to box 1.
Always back to box 1 if wrong.
Box 4, infrequent. Maybe review once every 2 weeks. Correct moves to box 5, incorrect goes all the way back to box 1. Box 5, lowest frequency. These are the concepts you've almost mastered. Maybe you only review these once a month or even less frequently. If you get it right, it stays in box 5. If you finally get it wrong here, back to box 1 it goes.
That is brilliant because it automatically, systematically focuses your limited study effort only on the material you struggle with the most. The cards that keep getting bumped back to box 1.
Exactly.
The cards you know well, the ones that make it to box 4 or 5, are reviewed far less frequently, freeing up your time.
That's precisely why it is so efficient. You are constantly identifying and targeting your personal weak points, forcing that desirable difficulty exactly where it's needed, and maximizing the time between successful retrievals for the stuff you know well, which research shows enhances long-term retention. It adapts to your learning pace for each individual item.
Okay, that's a fantastic system for memorization. Finally, let's talk about leveraging external help and utilizing support systems. Because as you said, effective studying requires effort, but independent studying shouldn't mean isolated studying, right?
Absolutely not. This is crucial, particularly as students transition to higher education, college, university, grad school, where the expectations shift dramatically towards self-directed learning, but support is often more available if you seek it out.
So, first step, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yes. Always seek clarification. When you're studying and you hit something confusing or you have a doubt or something just doesn't quite click no matter how minor it seems, write that question down immediately.
Don't just gloss over it.
No. And then make a point to get it clarified. Ask a study partner, ask a TA, ask the professor during office hours. Those moments of confusion are often signals that your mind is actively trying to connect concepts in memory. Resolving that ambiguity directly enhances the final memory storage and understanding.
Makes sense. And we can't overlook the power of collaboration, not just for answers, but for accountability and application study groups.
Study groups or even just finding a dedicated study buddy can be invaluable if structured properly.
If structured properly, not just social hour.
Right. Good collaboration encourages an interactive learning environment. It provides critical accountability. Knowing someone expects you to show up prepared for your space study session really helps you stick to the schedule, and it helps clarify confusing topics through discussion.
And the best part.
The most profound benefit, though, circling back again, is that it provides a perfect, built-in audience for you to use the Feynman technique.
Teaching each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Taking turns teaching concepts to your peers is one of the most powerful ways to cement your own understanding and instantly expose any remaining knowledge gaps you didn't realize you had. Plus, you get to hear their explanations too.
Okay, study groups are good. Finally, for our listeners who are in college or graduate school, we really must talk about leveraging the experts themselves, the instructors.
Absolutely. Talk to your teachers and professors, please. Seeking help is a sign of proactive engagement and academic maturity, not weakness. That perception really needs to change.
Especially in higher ed.
Especially visiting professors or teaching assistants during their office hours is incredibly beneficial. It not only helps you clarify difficult material and get personalized feedback tailored to your specific struggles,
Which is huge.
but it also establishes a professional connection. Instructors get to know you as an engaged student, and anecdotally, students who actively seek help often gain subtle hints about what the instructor deems most important for the upcoming exam, or maybe even explicit guidance on how to approach a tricky assignment. Never underestimate the value of that personal academic connection. They want to help you learn. #Howtro, Pesha.
Wow. This has been a massive download of actionable cognitive science and practical strategies. To wrap up, let's try to summarize the two major paradigm shifts, the two big mental flips required for you, the listener, to move from simply surviving your classes to truly mastering your material. What are they?
Okay, paradigm shift number 1. You absolutely must move from passive consumption, that comfortable rut of endless rereading, underlining, highlighting, just letting the words wash over you, to consistently engaging in active retrieval.
Pulling the information out, not pushing it in.
Exactly. This means almost every study session needs to be dominated by activities like self-quizzing, using flashcards effectively, like with Leitner, attempting to teach the concept aloud, Feynman, and practicing problems by explaining the mechanism and the why, not just getting the answer. You have to actively exercise those memory circuits until they, metaphorically speaking, ache a little.
Okay, passive to active. What's the second major shift?
The second major shift concerns time. You have to move away from cramming those intense, stressful, sleep-deprived bursts right before an exam towards spacing and interleaving your study sessions deliberately over time.
Planning it out.
Yes. Distributed practice, spreading your learning over days and weeks, combined with mixing up your topics during study sessions, interleaving, gives your brain the necessary rest, the crucial consolidation time, and the beneficial cognitive struggle required for knowledge to truly solidify into the neocortex for flexible, long-term use.
Active retrieval instead of passive review. Spacing instead of cramming. Those are the big two.
Those are the cornerstones. And the ultimate payoff is this. Effective studying is not some innate talent you're born with. It is absolutely a skill that requires conscious effort to learn and refine.
But it can be learned.
It absolutely can. By focusing your effort on the quality and intensity of the learning strategies you use, not just blindly logging more hours, you genuinely expand your mental capacity, you build indispensable skills like discipline and time management, and you develop true critical thinking abilities that pay dividends far, far beyond the classroom throughout your entire life.
That's a powerful conclusion. Okay, so we've given you many powerful, proven strategies today, from the Leitner system for flashcards to Pomodoro for time management to the Feynman technique for deep understanding, spacing, interleaving, the whole toolkit. Let's leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on.
Right. The most effective study method, when all is said and done, is ultimately the one that is tailored to your individual cognitive preferences, your specific courses, and your life circumstances. We've given you the science-backed tools, but the real challenge and opportunity now is an exercise in metacognition. Thinking about your own thinking.
Experiment on yourself.
Exactly. You must use these strategies as a starting point to experiment. Schedule some spaced review sessions. Try interleaving different types of math problems. Adopt the Pomodoro technique for a week. Really pay attention to how it feels and what results you get. Observe your own thinking processes. Which tools actually click best for you? Which techniques yield the highest return, the most learning and retention for the least amount of miserable time spent?
What stands out to you from today's deep dive? Where will you start? Start experimenting today. Find your optimal combination. That's all the time we have for this deep dive.